Good morning, guys. We don't want to make you wait any longer, especially those people who were super on time, our early birds. Thank you so much. This is my first time training with the CSC, so I'm excited to be here with you guys. We've got 28 scheduled, so we'll see if we get a few more in the next few minutes. Otherwise, this is our core group, and let's get some stuff done. So today we're going to talk about identifying trauma in youth. So we're going to talk about all the way from 0 to 17 and what that looks like, what those different age brackets look like, what the differences are, what the similarities are, where there's crossover, how you can be most useful in your function in picking this stuff up, when to refer out, and kind of everything you need to know as a primer course on trauma. So I'm a trauma specialist. I've been working in trauma for, 8 years now, and it fell in my lap. I didn't mean to be working in trauma, but I was doing in-home counseling for families and children, and I ended up on my caseload at a community mental health center with a little girl who was 4 when I started working with her, 6 when I finished, and she was removed from the home for alleged sexual abuse and confirmed physical abuse from the biological parents. The parents were never married. They then split up, and the child had been in 2 or 3 different foster homes at the time, so she was in foster care when I started working with her. And here she was, 4 years old, and had been through some stuff. So what the court wanted to know, what ChildNet wanted to know was this child sexually abused? Well, it happened from 0 to 3 before she was removed from the home, if it happened at all. Do you think a child 0 to 3 has good language skills to be able to tell you that someone did something inappropriate to her? Not so much, right? So what are the behaviors that we're looking for? That's some of the stuff we're going to cover today. How can you tell? How can you know? And then in court, can you know for sure? You can't know for sure. You can say, these are the behaviors I've seen, which is consistent with this profile. Good morning. Here. Which is consistent with this profile, and that's all I know. So you can let the court make their determination from there. So just because you've seen the behaviors doesn't mean you know for sure that something's happened, but there's a profile that's fairly consistent. So that's some of the stuff we're going to talk about. So hopefully this will be super useful for you. I am a licensed mental health counselor. I'm also a certified clinical hypnotherapist. My primary method of working with clients is rapid resolution therapy, which is a form of hypnotherapy. I'm doing in about 5 hours what used to take me 18 months of narrative therapy. So I'm clearing trauma really, really fast. And I love it, and it's fantastic. And to watch your clients change is just so beautiful. So I'm super excited about what I do. I'm also a qualified supervisor for mental health counseling interns, and I'm taking on interns. So that's something I really love to. I love to teach. So, yes.
Are you working with kids right now?
I work with kids and adults, and my primary focus is adults or teens, but I do see children if it's for trauma, anxiety, something specific. I don't do parenting anymore. So I don't see kids because of parenting issues. And you know, a lot of the times, if you guys work with kids, a lot of times it's a parenting issue. So I work with specifically trauma, anxiety, that kind of thing. So that's a lot about me. Additionally, I wrote the only preventative book on trauma. So this is how to prevent trauma in childhood years through the teens. It's not a parenting style book. It's not a parenting guide. It's, hey, there's little stuff that you might be doing or saying. That's that if only stuff. So Bubble Wrap Your Kids is on Amazon if you're interested, and Kindle. And I had all these clients coming in as adults that said, if only this, if only that, this wouldn't have happened to me. And I thought, what a shame, you know, that they're seeing in retrospect that this was preventative stuff. And so I went on looking, is there a book that parents can read that if only they didn't do the following things, maybe, you know, their kids would grow up better, right? So I'm looking to put myself out of work, right? So I want there to be less trauma. I mean, I think that's fair, right? It's so selfish. So, you know, I want the next generation of trauma therapists to have less work to do. I think the world's better like that. So silly as a job function, but, you know, I'll find something else. But there wasn't any books like that. So have you seen how you guys go to the mall every once in a while? Have you seen the little girls, the little 13-year-old girls with Juicy across their rear? Have you seen that? That's not okay. It's not. Because you and I know that that's a brand. Does the average 40-year-old man know that? I don't know, right? And even if they do, is that the first thought that comes to mind? We're looking at a 13-year-old girl's rear. should it be anywhere in their thoughts coming to mind, right? So that's a preventative thing, it's a little thing, right? So it's not about parenting style, it's not about how you should raise your kids, it's just like little things, think ahead stuff, you know? Teach them to call their body parts by their proper names so that if something happens, they can tell you what happened. That's essential because so many kids don't know what to say, or there's a taboo, you know? So it's little stuff like that. So that's what Spellable Rep's about. So I'm not here to plug my book, but I just want you guys to know like there's stuff out there that you can utilize. It's got your own skill base. You guys have all seen the pretest, hopefully. Those of you who came in late, it's right in the front of your folder. And so please do complete this. It'll take you just a couple of seconds, and right on top there. And I'm not going to grade you, but we're going to go through it together as we hit the questions. So you'll see as we go along if you got it or if you didn't get it. So you're on the honor system. I'm not going to make you do a full introduction because I hate that thing when you go around the room and you're like, oh God, I have to talk next, right? So all I want to know though is who I'm working with. So if you could just tell me your first name. I'm really terrible with names, but I'm going to do my best. So tell me your first name, what agency you work with, and what your capacity is in terms of working with youth or working with trauma, and just so I get a feel for like how I can be of most use to you, and then and hopefully I can tailor stuff to you in that way. So we'll start in the back. See, you guys. Gotcha. Yep.
Okay, my name is Joanna Orrego. I am a licensed mental health counselor. I used to work at the clinical therapist in Georgia. I'm back in Florida now. Not currently working. Just want to get as much information before I start applying again.
Awesome, thanks.
Hi, my name is Stephanie. I work at His House Children's Home, which is child welfare foster care agency. Yeah, so with foster children, and then as an intern, I'm doing therapy with foster children.
Great. Perfect, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Rashonda Boynton. I work for SOS Children's Villages of Florida, which is a residential foster care home. I'm a CIL case manager, so we work with kids who have aged out of foster care.
Wow.
And what I'd love to be able to gain from this is being able to work with our kids who have experienced trauma and how to help them cope through it, in addition to when to seek help. Like, when is it too much and when to seek help.
Perfect, thank you.
Hi, my name is Rashonda Cross. I'm also with SOS Children's Villages of Florida. In the IL department, we work with the ages of 18 to 23 years old.
My name is Alyssa Davis. I work with the Lighthouse of Broward. I also do adjustment for blindness counseling with children to adults. But I would like to see how to identify traumas that way appropriately.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Amy. I'm an LCSW. I work in the Broward County Schools, and I work with the deaf and hard of hearing kids in the system.
Okay, and how does knowing about trauma help you? Or did you
Our
just need
kids
some credit?
run into trauma just about daily.
Wow.
So just to try to catch the cues a lot quicker than I have.
Good, thank you.
I'm Dr. Gail, I'm a community-based dementia and time strengthening, and this can help me in the assessment process for referring and developing a case plan. I'm Nicole, I'm with Community-Based Connection, and I want to be able to help the parents identify the trauma, and they can deal with it.
Hi, I'm Elaine. I work at Places for Girls, and I'm a therapist. And I think that this training would be most definitely appropriate for me because a lot of our girls experience trauma. But anything that I can gain to kind of boost my physical experience to help them would be awesome.
Good, thanks.
Hi, I'm Maria. I'm a practicum student at Hillary University. I'm training to be a social intervention advocate, and we work with families and children who have displayed inappropriate sexual behavior.
Okay, so this is really right up your alley. Okay.
Hi, my name is Marsha Evans, and I also work at Junior and Associates. And again, we do individual family group therapies for children who are exhibit inappropriate sexual behavior. So there's a lot of trauma that surrounds that population.
Good, yes.
My name is Stephanie. I work for New Day Diversion, part of Memorial Healthcare System, and we deal with kids who committed their first crimes, and I think it was beneficial to try to see like if they have any other signs so we can refer out appropriately.
Fantastic, thanks.
Hi, my name is Simona. I also work for VA Memorial. Although trauma is not like the primary issue that we deal with our kids, it might be a secondary, and those have identified trauma might help, guide our clinical practice.
Perfect, thanks.
I'm Laura and I work for the child protection team, so we deal with trauma every day. You can always learn something,
Okay,
so
just more skills.
more skills.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Kim and I work with Team Saving Our Youth. I also do the New Day program, so again, being able to refer our clients out to resources.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Promise. I'm with New Day with Memorial as well. And I think it'll be really useful to be able to identify trauma with the kids that have committed their first crimes too.
Hi, my name is Sasha. I'm also with the same program at Memorial. I'm
All right,
just
hey, thanks, New Day.
I'm just looking to, gain more information, be able to, see the signs of any trauma, to be able to, provide the proper treatment or refer them out if necessary.
Cool, thank you.
I'm Marina. I'm also from the Memorial Team, but in a different program. I work with teens and substance abuse. I do in-home therapy with families and teens. And I don't have much experience with children, so it would be good to learn the signs of children who don't have trauma.
Okay.
And just in general, interventions, trauma interventions.
Okay, so be aware that as we go through the signs, they're going to be very similar as in adults, and then we're going to tease out where it's different in children, so you should be able to generalize that as well.
Good morning. My name is Silvani. I'm the life coach, one of the life coach and case managers at SunServe. I work in the youth department. SunServe is an organization that works with LGBT individuals specifically, and we work with kids middle school and high school age, some up until they're about 22. Right now I'm a BSW student, so I feel that while I'm learning in class, it would be good for me to get this extra education so that way I can better help the youth that I work with, especially since a lot of them do come in with trauma, specifically dealing with the home life.
Family stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Shermie. I'm from Peace Center for Girls. I'm a diversion counselor there, and I'd like to learn more of the signs of trauma.
Cool.
I'm Nikki from Diversion for Pace Center for Girls, which is New Day. And I would like to learn more techniques for intervention.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
I'm Barbara Donovan. I work at Our Children Are Future, and I do therapy with them and I do intake.
Okay.
So I'd like to learn to identify. I see a lot of trauma.
Perfect. So this training, for those of you who said you were looking for techniques or for processing trauma, that's not this training. We're going to do, this is identification only. So in putting in proposals to CSU, you have to be very specific as to what you're going to be presenting. And in 3.5 hours, although it seems like, a half day is a long day, but 3.5 hours of material is not a lot of material in terms of trauma, because there's so much to it. I mean, I've spent, almost in the entirety of my career in trauma, so that I could stand up here with no slides and talk to you about trauma all day and answer all of your questions, But today we're going to focus just on identifying. So I'd be happy if Nicolette wants me to put in a proposal later for trauma techniques. That's a whole separate thing. So for those of you looking for techniques, kind of morph that today into just taking in more of little things that you didn't know. We're going to talk about the what's behind the trauma, and so that stuff might be pretty interesting to you. And from there, you can kind of add to what you already know about techniques and bolster that. So I'll try to throw some of that stuff in as we go as well. So thank you, that's really useful for me. And I hope you learn something about each other and the programs that are available in your community. So that's always really interesting. And PACE, well represented today, right? Memorial, well represented today. All right, enough about that. We already talked about this. Okay, statistics. So why are you here? What's the deal with trauma, right? Who gives a crap about trauma? I do. So according to the APA update in 2008 is the most recent that I could find all the statistics on. More than 2/3 of children report experiencing a traumatic event by the age of 60. Sorry, 6 would be too early. 16. 2/3. That's a lot. That's way, way, way too many. So there's a good reason to be here, right? There's a lot to say. Community violence is a way that kids can take in trauma. So isn't there some stuff going on in the media right now? Isn't there some community violence taking place? If your kid were watching out the front window at that stuff, that's not so good for you, right? That's scary stuff. And so any kind of scary stuff like that, it can be traumatizing. So we're also going to talk today about what can be traumatizing and what is traumatizing, and you'll find that they're not always the same thing. So if I say it can be, it may or may not be for that particular child. So two kids can see the same thing and might get different reactions from it. So I'll use can be a lot of times, and I don't mean that it's not true. I mean that it depends on the kid, and we'll talk about that in a later slide. I'm ahead of myself, sorry. So 39 to 85% of kids witness community violence before the age of 18. That's kind of a lot. 25 to 43% are exposed to sexual abuse, and we actually think the statistic is higher because think of all the kids who don't report. So we actually think that statistic is much, much higher because that's only the reported numbers. 2.5 billion children over a 10-year span were exposed to disaster. So think floods, think earthquake, think hurricanes, blizzards. 7.9 million children in just 1 year alone had unintentional injuries. That can be a big deal. So who here's ever broken a bone? Really? Just a few of us? That's so unusual. Wow, good for you guys with your gilded lives. Or your calcium intake. When you break a bone, you're in a cast, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, longer, right? Now what? You can't go in the pool, you can't hang out with your friends. That can be traumatizing, right? Not is, can be, right? Community violence and injury are more likely to happen to boys in poverty and in Native American youth, which are also generally in poverty. So why do you think that boys are more likely to experience this?
They're more active and going around doing stuff.
So more likely to be injured?
Yeah.
Okay, could be. What else? Take a shot.
They're more daring.
Yeah, they're more risk takers.
More risk takers? Yeah, oftentimes. How about community violence? Why are they more likely to experience community violence?
Gangs.
Gangs? Absolutely. Yep, that's the number one reason. Very good. And more likely in impoverished areas.
Yeah.
Well, community mental health centers, generally in Weston, not so much, right? Generally in impoverished areas. Fair? So, why? Because that's where the need is. That's absolutely where the need is. So you guys are out on the battlefront. So thank you. Sexual abuse. Sexual abuse in children is thought to be 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys. And that's thought to be a low statistic. These are our reported numbers. For every one child who reports sexual abuse, how many do you guess don't report? You know, we don't have those numbers, right? Because those aren't statistics we can get. But think of how many people you know that have been through something and didn't tell anybody. At least one person? So if that's at least one more person, maybe 1 more percent, 10 more percent, 30 more percent, we don't know. So our reported numbers are 25% of girls and so 1 in 6, 20%, less than that, 15% of boys are sexually abused before the age of 18. Disgusting, yeah? So, a need for trauma counseling, a need for trauma training, a need for community people to really get the message of this and be able to identify this and do something good with it. Fair enough? Feel good about being here now? Gonna spend a good day together? Have a day. So what is trauma? Question 1 on your pretest. True or false? In order for an event to be traumatic, it must involve threat or perceived threat of injury, death, or loss of integrity. True or false? True. You must feel like you're going to die or be harmed. Maybe you are actually harmed. Maybe you feel like you're going to be harmed. Both are accurate. Remember, witnessing community violence or having community violence done upon you are equally as potentially traumatic. So if you feel like the rioters outside are going to break into your house and kill your family, is the same as being in the riot outside. Especially if you're a kid. Even for adults. Scary stuff. So threat or perceived threat of injury, death, or loss of physical integrity to self or others. They said, if I didn't do that thing, they were going to kill my little sister. Perceived threat? Yeah? Interact with me. It makes it go by much faster, I promise. A feeling of terror, a feeling of horror. A feeling of helplessness at the time of the event. Well, wouldn't you feel like that if they said, you don't do this, we're going to kill your little sister?
Yeah.
Pretty terrifying, yeah? Our media whips us up into a frenzy every time there's a tropical storm warning, right? Right? Anyone not from Florida originally? Many of us, right? I'm from LA. We don't have hurricanes there. We have earthquakes. Earthquakes happen and then they're over and there's no warning. I like it like that. There's no media frenzy. Publix doesn't run out of tortilla chips. It's true. I went to the store the other day, post-hurricane, there was not one tortilla chip in the whole store. Stop buying those flavored Lay's, you guys. Publix, stop it. We don't eat that stuff. We eat Tostitos. Just give us more Tostitos, right? Do you have, when the storm is coming, a feeling of terror and horror? Potentially, right? If you watch the Weather Channel, you will. What did they say? You will die. Oh my gosh, they actually said that on TV, right? Well, what's going to give you a feeling of horror and terror more than that? Right? So, even though the storm passed us, pretty much, right? We had some bad rain and some bad wind, and we had some damage, and other counties had much more damage than we did, right? Could you have still had a feeling of terror and horror? Could you have had a perceived threat of death? Potentially traumatizing. Now, we're adults, and many of us know how to handle storms, right? And we're prepared and it's all fine. But if you're 6, or you're 3, or you're 9, maybe not so much. And maybe some adults too. Yeah? So you can't count out people's coping skills and preparedness and all these sorts of things. Sexual abuse, physical abuse, domestic violence, community and school violence. We talked about community violence already. School violence, school shootings. Been hearing about that? Perceived or actual threat? Yes? Yeah. Right? I'm getting kids coming in to see me because of school refusal. Are you guys starting to see some of that? I don't want to go to school. What if there's a shooter today?
Yep.
And then bullying.
And bullying. Absolutely. School violence.
The clown.
Don't get me started on clowns. You know what? We don't need clowns anymore. We just don't. We haven't needed clowns in 30 years. We just stopped with the clowns. They're not cute. It's not cute. Sexual abuse, physical abuse, that part you knew, right? You knew that before you walked in here. Domestic violence, maybe you didn't think about that one. Maybe that one was fresh on your mind. Certainly a child who lives in a household with domestic violence is experiencing neighborhood violence right in their home. Potentially threat of injury, could be. Or physical integrity to others. Well, if dad beats mom, just to be stereotypical, right? Wouldn't that be loss of integrity to others? And potentially self. Depends on how that family is, right? So, big stuff. Medical trauma. Have you heard this one? What do you think medical trauma constitutes? Surgery? Yeah, good. Sure.
So a little boy that has like brain tumor and it's coming back.
Okay.
It's very traumatic for him and the family.
Absolutely. Tumors, cancers, any of that kind of stuff. Illnesses in general. Even just sometimes like the flu can be traumatic for some kids if they perceive threat of injury and death. So think now about the parents, right? Because we can't take a child out of their environment. So think now, if the parent is saying, oh my gosh, Timmy, oh my gosh, you have a fever, and if it gets too high, your brain will boil. Have you met parents like that?
Yeah.
See, I'm not making stuff up, right? You guys kind of laughed at first, but haven't you seen parents like that, right? And then they whip the child into a frenzy, like the Weather Channel, right? And then what happens to that kid? That kid freaks out, right? Because he doesn't know that that's unlikely, or that there's hospitals and fever reducers and all sorts of things, right? And the pediatrician on speed dial, he doesn't know that stuff. He just freaks out. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna die because I have a fever. And then the next time that kid gets sick, what happens? Nothing good. Eventually.
What did you say about like the different diseases that come, like Ebola, Zika,
Absolutely.
all of that is traumatizing.
Absolutely.
All that.
Yep. And then it disappears from our media. Yeah. What have you heard about Ebola lately? Weird, right? Weird. So, Zika, right? We're hearing about Zika now, Ebola. What was it before Ebola? There was something else.
Swine flu.
Swine flu. Mad cow?
Bird flu.
Anthrax. What is it?
Anthrax.
Anthrax. Yeah. Yeah, we haven't heard about that in a while. It's been a couple of years. Yeah. So, but is all this stuff out there? Absolutely, right? And now, kids are on the internet. What's on the internet? Oh, every horrible thing. I don't know if you've been on there lately, but it's not so great out there. Right? That's the dangerous jungle you gotta trek through. I had a kid, well, I'll challenge you when I finish this. Car accidents, another kind of medical trauma injury, right? Actual injury, not perceived injury, right? Terrorism. You let your kids watch the news? Caution, right? Terrorism, war. Aren't we hearing about that? Isn't that true in the real world? Yeah? Natural and man-made disasters. We talked about hurricanes and floods and all that kind of thing, right? Kids who went through Katrina, right? Actual threat of injury or physical integrity, loss of stuff, yeah? Could have died, absolutely. And then afterward, a bunch of people got sick, right? Because there wasn't enough clean drinking water and things like that. Absolutely threat of injury. Death by suicide. Someone you know kills themselves. Pretty traumatizing? We're seeing a lot more kids committing suicide for bullying and cyberbullying. We're seeing an increase in suicide in kids. Not teens, kids. Littler kids. Ugh. Death by suicide. The likelihood of your friend killing themselves is higher now than it used to be. Awful, right? Loss of significant person. Grandpa dies, mom dies, parent leaves and doesn't come back. Parent goes to jail, or another relative, right? So all potentially traumatizing. All right, here's a situation that I had come into my office. There was a kid, he was 11, and he was dared by his two friends to watch the movie Two Girls, One Cup. Have you heard of it? Have you not heard of it? Okay, for those of you who have not heard of it, I'm going to give you the briefest overview of what it's about. Basically, it's a pornographic film that is filthy disgusting about two girls doing things to and with one another regarding this one cup that they share, and it has urine and feces and vomit and stuff, and they drink from it and sex from it and all sorts of. Have you got the gist of it? Yeah. Good. I see your nauseated faces as the fact that that's enough. Okay. So it's pretty sick. Okay. It's pretty advanced stuff. So as adults, I see your faces. I see. We're not going to talk about it anymore. Promise. We're done talking about that thing. So as adults, we're like, ugh, right? So now, if you were 11 years old, how much did you know about sex at 11? Right? You had a lot of misinformation? Yeah? And then if you saw this, would you have had a lot more misinformation? Yeah. Okay? So this kid was dared to watch this film, which he did because you can't turn down a dare. Because when you're 11, that's important, right? And so he did. And he was having nightmares, he was having flashbacks, he was having, name all the trauma symptoms, right? He was afraid to go to school because he didn't want to see his friends, because every time he saw them, he thought of that. He was afraid to go on the internet. He couldn't do his homework because some of it involved being on the computer. He was just a mess, this poor kid, you know? And so, are you ready for that? Are you ready to see that now? No. Were you ready to see that at 11? Oh, no. Right? And so this poor kid comes in, and this is what he's got going on, and so I treat him, and then he's okay? So, was there threat of injury? No? Was there threat of death?
No.
Was there loss of physical integrity of self or others?
Yes.
Was there a feeling of terror or horror or helplessness at the time of the event?
Horror. I saw the video when I was in high school, and then I had my teammates watch it. I just mentioned it to them, and they're like, okay.
Oh no. If you wiki it, that one sentence that I gave you is plenty.
Don't do it.
That's enough. Yeah. No, don't. I'm sorry for you. I feel really bad for you. A feeling of horror or terror. Can we agree with that? Yeah. So, does it fall under sexual abuse?
Yes.
Yes, maybe. I'm hearing some maybes. Physical abuse. Domestic violence. Community violence. School violence. I'm hearing some maybes. Okay. Medical trauma.
Physical abuse. In fact, he goes to school and he says to his friends, ooh, I don't like it, or even on his facial expressions, they know how it got to him, and they could beat him up for that.
That wasn't a threat for this particular kid, but yes, potentially. Yes, potentially. Medical trauma?
No.
Car accident?
No.
Terrorism? War? Natural or man-made disaster? I mean, it's kind of a man-made disaster. Death by suicide or loss of significant person, no, right? So basically, it's sexual abuse. Because if you show an 11-year-old child porn, that's sexual abuse, don't you think?
Yeah.
So even though this is not something that happened directly to this child, he wasn't forced to participate in these kinds of lewd acts, there's still a feeling of terror and horror, right? And he was textbook trauma. You could check off all the PTSD symptoms. So it gets a little ambiguous. Do you see what I'm saying? Sometimes you come in and you say, well, trauma is like, you were raped by your uncle, right? That's the thing. But see how it's much bigger than that, or can be potentially much bigger than that? And not every kid is going to be traumatized by all this stuff.
Right. It's a subjective experience.
Absolutely subjective. So we're going to talk more about that. So far, so good? Questions, thoughts yet? Good so far. All right. So, simple and complex trauma. Simple trauma is a single event, something that happens once, like a hurricane. Okay? It has limited abusers. So generally one person or a couple of people, and that's it. The abusers are generally not known or not trusted people in that child's life. So let's say that you were 7 years old, not you, let's say a kid was 7 years old, was in the unusual case kidnapped by a stranger, taken into one of those windowless white vans that we see so many things about, and abused and then let back out. That would be a case of simple trauma. It happened once, abusers were not known or not trusted, and there were a limited number of persons involved. When we say simple, that doesn't diminish the extent of the trauma. Simple trauma and complex trauma can both be incredibly pervasive to the person who experienced it. So calling it simple isn't a matter of diminishing it, it's just a matter of separating the two styles. So please get that I'm not saying it's not a bad thing. It's a horrific thing, but it's just a way of separating those two. Complex trauma now is kind of the opposite, right? So if you, if that kid was pulled into the van and by a stranger, which I think you guys know that stranger danger is pretty much not true, right? Only 7% of cases of child abuse happen from strangers. So 93% are by persons that the child knows. So that's, yeah, stranger danger seems all well and good, but kind of is missing the mark by a lot. Right? Multiple related or unrelated events. So, is the likelihood of this kid who was pulled into the van and abused by a stranger, what's the likelihood